Judea in the last years of Herod the king. The Nazarene, Book 1, Son of Man. Chapter 1, Bethlehem. The night he arrived, it smelled of wet limestone and blood. The contractions came faster now. Mary gripped the straw with both hands. Her teeth clenched against the sound that wanted to escape. The stable was cold. A single oil lamp threw shadows that jumped with each gust through the gaps in the stone. Joseph crouched beside her, one hand on her shoulder, the other wrapped around the handle of an adze. It was all he had. He was a carpenter. This was what carpenters carried. Breathe, he said. Just breathe. Outside, a dog barked, then another. Then the dogs went quiet. And there were hooves on the road. Multiple horses moving with purpose. Joseph stood and put himself between Mary and the door. "They found us," Mary whispered. The hooves stopped. Voices low in a language he did not recognize. Footsteps came toward the stable door. The child came before the door did. He came in a single hard rush, and Joseph caught him with one hand, the adze still in the other. And for a second, there was no thought in him at all. Only the small, wet weight against his palm, and the absence of a cry. The infant did not cry. Joseph laid him on Mary's chest and cut the cord with the only blade he had. Mary's hands found her son before her mind did. She opened her eyes. The infant was looking at her. A newborn's eyes drift. She knew that much. This child's eyes were on her face. He looked at her the way someone looks at a person they have been told about for a long time, as if she were the one he had crossed the distance to meet. Then he blinked, and it was just a newborn's eyes again, unfocused, taking in lamplight. She wept without sound. Joseph rested his hand on the cloth of the infant's back. Through the rough weave he could feel the ribs and the way they moved. He had built a cradle for this child 4 months ago. The cradle was in Nazareth. They were not. The footsteps were at the door. The man who pushed it open had been tracking a signal for 11 months. His name was Adnan. He had come 6 weeks on horseback out of the east, following a conjunction 3 traditions had predicted across 3 borders, and he had felt the pressure in his chest since they entered the valley. He had watched men die in 3 languages, and not blinked. The air in the stable pressed against his chest. Inside, a young man stood with a carpenter's tool raised. Behind him, a girl in the straw, and an infant wrapped in rough cloth. "Who are you?" the young man said. His voice was steady. His hands were not. Adnan raised his palms. "We are not your enemy." "Help how?" Joseph said. "Herod knows." Adnan kept his voice level. A child born in Bethlehem. A threat to his throne. "We passed through Jerusalem 3 days ago. I read the order myself over a clerk's shoulder. Every male child in this district under 2 years. He signs it tonight." He paused. "I have not slept since I saw it." Joseph's knees went soft. He locked them. "Why would you help us?" "Because if this child is what the signs suggest, his survival matters. To everyone." One corner of Adnan's mouth pulled, then went flat. "And if he is just a child, you'll have gold and a head start on the soldiers." Joseph looked at Mary. She was watching the Persian. "Let him approach," she said. Adnan crossed the stable slowly and knelt beside her. "May I?" Mary hesitated. Then she shifted the bundle toward him, and he moved the cloth aside to see the face. The infant's eyes were closed. Then they opened and looked at him. It was not a newborn's gaze. The child's eyes focused on him, through him. For an instant, Adnan felt himself seen. And he stopped breathing. And the infant blinked. It was just a baby. A child like any other child. Adnan's thumb was on the leather cord at his left wrist, the cord an old teacher had tied there when he was 16. He had not put it there. He could not make his hand let go. Casper's voice came from the doorway, and Adnan realized he had been kneeling in silence too long. He stood. "Bring the gifts." 3 wrapped packages. "Gold," Adnan said. "Enough to establish yourself anywhere in the Empire. Frankincense. Trade goods portable." He hesitated on the 3rd. "Myrrh." Joseph frowned. "Burial resin." Adnan held his gaze. "For preservation." Mary accepted it without a word. Her hand closed around the package and held it against the child. "Where do we go?" Joseph said. "Egypt, Alexandria. The Jewish quarter is large, and Herod's reach does not extend that far." Adnan gave him a map and the route, off the main roads, traveling at night. "We'll draw the pursuit east, buy you what time we can. Hours, not days." At the stable door, Adnan looked at the infant one more time. Eyes closed now. A sleeping baby, small and ordinary, on his way to exile in a country that was not his. "Go," he said. "The soldiers will be here soon." They went. Adnan did not enter the verification in his ledger. He had carried the ledger across 3 borders. 1 column for the dream signal, 1 for the conjunction, and a 3rd for the verification of the child. The 3rd column had never been filled. He stood in the stable after the family had gone, the ledger in one hand, and did not open it. "What did you see?" Casper said from the doorway. Adnan did not answer. He mounted his horse and turned east, toward the road that would draw Herod's men away from the family on the southern path, and understood that he had just made himself a witness to something he would not be permitted to name. The night was cold. The donkey's rhythm sent pain through Mary with every step. She had given birth hours ago. She should have been sleeping, surrounded by women who knew what to do. Instead, she was fleeing through the dark. "Do you think they were telling the truth?" she whispered. "About Herod? Does it matter? We couldn't stay either way." She pressed her face against the top of the infant's head. "The angels said the boy would be great," she said into his hair. The angel had not mentioned what it would cost his mother. Joseph did not answer. He kept walking, and his hand found the cloth at the infant's back and rested there. An hour before dawn, they heard hoofbeats, and Joseph pulled the donkey off the path into the rocks until the sound passed and faded east towards Bethlehem. Mary thought of the mothers who would wait to soldiers and knew there was no helping them, and hated knowing it. Dawn found them miles away, resting in a ravine. Mary nursed the infant while Joseph ate dried figs and watched the road. "What did you see?" she said, "when you looked at him just now?" "My son," he said. He was quiet a moment. Sometimes flashes like there's something behind his eyes. He looked at her. "You." She did not look up. "The same." He looked at the child, then back at her. "Does it scare you?" She watched the infant's hand grip her finger. "I said yes," she said. "And here we are." Joseph looked at the child. His son. Not his son. He looked back toward Bethlehem, where smoke was rising somewhere in the distance. He did not tell Mary. They traveled south for days, and one night the dust turned from gray to amber, and the stars hung lower. Egypt. They stopped at an oasis where other travelers had a fire going. Joseph ate. Then he slept. Mary did not. She sat against the trunk of a palm with the infant awake against her chest, and she held him a little away from her body so she could see him. He opened his eyes. They were on her face, not drifting. The same look from the stable, sustained now without surprise on either side. She had been waiting since the stable to be alone with him. She had not let herself know she was waiting. The fire moved on the child's face, Across the camp, a stranger laughed in a language she did not yet know. She brought him close and put her cheek against the top of his head, and when she opened her eyes, his were closed. He had gone to sleep against her chest. She could feel his ribs moving, the small in and out of them. She did not put him down. Chapter 2, Egypt. The other children called him Yeshu. He was 2, then 3 in the courtyard of their kinsman's house in Alexandria, quick to laugh, quick to help a smaller boy who had fallen. Mary watched from the doorway, always the doorway, until Joseph told her she was holding too tight. "Let him play," he said. "Let him be a child. That's what he came here to be." Joseph found work within weeks, and the city became their lungs. The boy learned to walk on its streets and talk in its dialect. He knew the smell of the harbor and the fig vendor by the cistern who saved him a fig every morning and would not take a coin for it. And he had a friend. Demas, the stevedore's son, dark-haired, his own age. They built a tower of broken pottery the week Yeshua turned 3. And when it fell, Demas laughed harder than the noise of its breaking. After that, they were inseparable. In the 2nd year came the news. Herod was dead. The roads were opening. Then came the visitors, believers of an old way, kept since before the prophets, who filed past and looked at her son and wept. Last of them, an elderly woman who had walked 3 days, whose name meant encountered by appointment. She knelt before them. Her hand shook so badly she could barely hold it to the child's foot. He stirred, opened one eye, and wrapped his fingers around her thumb. She made a sound. She did not let go for a long time. When she finally rose, she spoke once to Joseph. "From Salem," she said. "The old way. We've kept it." Joseph held her gaze. He nodded. They left a gift. The Hebrew scriptures in Greek, complete, one of only a few such manuscripts in existence, in a case of cedar. "For him," they said, "for when he's ready." Joseph accepted it with both hands and held the case the way he held his best tools. Then they made their invitation. "Stay. Raise him here. The library, the schools, the finest minds in the world. Palestine would only limit him." For 3 weeks, the question sat between Joseph and Mary at meals, in the workshop, in the bed they shared, and no longer touched. Then one evening, after the child was asleep, it broke. "You're asking me to bury him in a village no one has ever heard of," Mary said. "I'm asking you to keep him alive." Her chin came up. "In Nazareth, when he could have the library, the scholars, whatever he's meant to become, he can't become it here," Joseph said. "He's hidden here." The words landed. She heard them. She stood, and the mending fell to the floor, and she walked past him into the courtyard. She did not slam the door. She did not look back. That night, Joseph sat on the workshop floor with a cedar case across his knees. He had built a cradle for a son he was told would be a king, and the cradle was still unfinished in his brother's storeroom in Nazareth. He pulled a length of rough sacking from the corner of the shop, laid it over the case, and folded the corners under until it looked like a bundle of nothing in particular. He left it with the other bundles. They did not speak about it again. On the 8th morning, Mary set down the water jar at the threshold and looked at Joseph across the courtyard. "Nazareth," she said. He nodded once. The morning they left, Yeshua went looking for Demas and found him at the cistern. In his hand was the wooden donkey Joseph had carved for him during the 2nd summer. He held it out. Demas took it. He looked at it, and then at Yeshua, and it was the look from the stable, the one that did not drift. Demas did not cry. Yeshua did not explain. Demas stood at the cistern until the caravan rounded the corner at the end of the street. The donkey closed in his hand. He kept it on a shelf above his sleeping mat for the rest of his life. In Nazareth, the boy ran through the small house and claimed every corner of it. But some evenings, Mary found him on the roof, quiet, looking south. "What are you thinking about?" she asked once. "My friend Demas," he said. "I miss him." And late one night, she got up and stood at the foot of the stone stairs that led to the roof. Joseph was up there, not moving, not making a sound. She had been married to him for almost 5 years, and she knew the silence of a man who is looking at something he is not allowed to want. He was facing south. In the corner of his workshop lay a cedar case wrapped in sacking that no one but he would ever lift. She stood at the bottom of the stairs and did not go up. She let him have it. Chapter 3. The Ridge. The hill above Nazareth had no name. Everyone just called it the Ridge. From the top you could see Carmel to the sea, Hermon capped white even in summer, the Jordan Valley east. Joseph took his son up every Sabbath, telling stories as they walked. At the turn where the path left the village, his hand rested on the low stone wall. On the stones he had been meaning to reset since the rains. "Why is the snow on Hermon but not here?" the boy asked. Joseph kept walking. "Because it's higher, colder." "Why is it colder when it's closer to the sun?" Joseph stood with his fingers hooked in his belt and stared at the mountain as if it might explain itself. "The wood was here before us," he said. "It will be here after." On the way down, he taught him a king's song, the one a king had walked through a valley with under his breath, and come out the other side. "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want." The boy learned the lines as they walked. Nazareth fed the rebuilding of Sepphoris 4 miles away, and the caravans used the crossroads below, and the boy listened to every stranger who watered animals within earshot. By 10, the traders knew him by name and saved their best stories for when he appeared. One summer, a cousin came up from the hill country with his mother. His name was John. A few months older, thin, quiet, and for 2 days, he watched Yeshua from a distance and did not approach. On the 3rd day, he sat on the rim of the cistern and said nothing for an hour. Yeshua sat beside him. After a while, the cousin hummed. No tune. A low, steady sound, almost on the threshold of hearing. The cousin did not seem to know he was making it. Yeshua's chest did the thing it had done since he could remember. A warmth that had no name. The cousin's hum and the thing in his chest moved at the same frequency. He did not say anything to the boy beside him. He did not know what he would have said. When the visit ended, the cousin went back to the hills with his mother. Mary watched the road until the dust settled. School was one room in the back of the synagogue. One morning in the 2nd year, the Chazan taught the creation account. 6 days of work, then rest. Yeshua's hand went up. If the Lord commanded us not to work on the Sabbath, why did he work for 6 days, creating the world? Wasn't that work? 11 boys turned to stare at him. The Chazan looked out the window. "That is a question for older men," he said finally. "Then why are we studying it?" The Chazan had no answer that would survive the next question. After class, he sat alone in the empty room, longer than the lesson had taken. Parents heard what their children brought home and blamed him. Older boys pushed him, and he stood there and would not fight, and the silence made them wilder, until Jacob the Mason's son made it his business that no one touched him. "I want you to defend yourself," Jacob asked once. "You could take any of them." "I don't know," he said. "It just doesn't feel right." He taught himself the harp from a traveling Greek who told him that a note was a number. How often a string trembled against the air in the space of one breath. Everything that sang had a rate. The boy held the idea against the warmth in his chest that had no name, and kept it. When he played, the thing behind his ribs went quiet. Not gone, quiet. Drawing came just as naturally, and his parents knew and said nothing. Then one slow afternoon at school, his hand found a piece of charcoal, and he drew the Chazan's face on the classroom stone. The deep-set eyes, the beard thinner on the left side where the man rubbed it while thinking. One by one the boys stopped reciting, and the Chazan followed their eyes down, and found his own likeness staring up at him, wearing the expression he wore when he thought no one was watching. "Who told you to draw this?" he said. "No one told me. Your face is interesting. The left side is different from the right. I wanted to understand why." The Chazan covered the drawing with his sandal, slowly, as if he were putting something to sleep. That evening, the elders came to the workshop with sharp voices. Yeshua heard them from outside, and after a while he walked in. "I drew a picture because the face was beautiful, and my hand knew how to find the shape of it," he said. "I don't believe I did anything wrong, but I can see that it troubled you, and I don't want to cause trouble for my father. I'll do whatever you decide." One of the elders sat down. Joseph ruled with the rabbis. No more drawings. Yeshua went to his room and lay with both palms flat against the cool limestone wall. In the corner sat the bundle wrapped in sacking that had been there since Egypt. "Something for when you're older," his father had said once. He looked at it. He turned his face to the wall. He never drew again while Joseph was alive. The year he turned 11, Joseph took him to Scythopolis on business, and the games were on. Yeshua stood at the rail of the amphitheater and forgot to breathe. Bodies worked past resistance, shaped by repetition, until only the essential remained. It was what his father did to wood. That evening at the inn he suggested it, a place in Nazareth for the boys to run and compete. Nothing pagan, just the training. "My son." The tone stopped him cold. The man who answered every question was gone. "Never again let me hear you give utterance to such an evil thought as long as you live." "Very well, my father," Yeshua said. "It shall be so." That night, Joseph lay on the inn mat with his back to his sleeping son, eyes open. He had shut a door tonight. He had heard the latch fall. He had built 1,000 doors in his life, and he knew which ones could be opened again. Before first light, Yeshua slipped out and went back. A single runner was on the track in the half-dark, running alone, for himself. Yeshua watched the stride, the breath coming in counted beats, and a boy he had not thought about in years surfaced in him. A dark-haired child at a cistern, hand closed around a wooden donkey. He walked back before his father woke. He did not tell Joseph. He memorized the stride. That same year, Mary fell ill. A fever that settled in her chest and would not break. For weeks, she could not leave her bed, and the younger children stood in the doorway and stared at her as if she was someone they used to know. Yeshua did not stand in the doorway. In the 3rd week, when she was at her worst, he sat on the floor beside her bed and took her hand. A hand that had been small around his back on the donkey ride out of Bethlehem. It was still small, thinner now. She tried to grip his hand and could not. Her fingers settled into his palm and went slack. He held her hand the way she had held him. He was 11 years old. What replaced his childhood was bread and laundry and Jude screaming for his mother from dusk to midnight. He fed 6 children before the sun came up. He did what was in front of him. "You seem older," the Chazan said one afternoon, watching him cross the square with 2 water jars and a toddler balanced against his shoulder. He set down the jars. "I'm older. Everyone gets older." That's not what I mean. He shifted the toddler on his hip. I know what you mean. Alone on the roof at night, he felt it. A pressure behind his sternum. He had told Joseph once in the workshop, late. Joseph put down his chisel, asked where in the chest, asked how long. His hands stayed flat on the bench, very still. And when Yeshua finished, Joseph picked the chisel back up and said, I believe you. He did not say what he believed. He had told Mary once, and her questions came so fast, he could not answer them, and her fingers left white marks on his wrist. So he stopped telling anyone. He let it grow in the dark. He was 12 now. In the spring, he would go to Jerusalem for his first Passover, to be counted among the sons of the commandment. The Sabbath, before the caravan, he climbed the ridge alone. He had climbed it beside Joseph since he was 5. He had not climbed it alone in 12 years. At the turn where the path left the village, he stopped at the low stone wall. The stones his father kept meaning to reset. Joseph had not reset them. Joseph would not reset them this year either. Yeshua knew this. He put his hand on the top stone and felt the place where his father's hand had rested 10,000 times. The caravan assembled in early April, over 100 pilgrims traveling together for safety. Yeshua walked with his father at first, asking about the route. As the days went on, he moved ahead. Mary watched from behind. The boy she had nursed and held against her chest while fleeing on a donkey in the dark walked ahead of her now, face turned towards something she could not see. Chapter 4. The Temple. The temple smelled of blood, not incense, not stone. The Passover slaughter had been running since dawn, the channels carved in the limestone doing their work, and when the wind shifted, it crossed the outer court. Like weather, Yeshua stood at the edge of the court of the Gentiles and breathed it in, 12 years old. First time. His palm rested on the outer wall, and the grain of the limestone under his hand was the same grain as the wall of his own room in Nazareth, the wall he had pressed his palms against the night his father forbade him to draw. He pressed his palm to this wall now. He made a fist against his ribs and stood at the gate and breathed the blood smell of his father's house. The caravan had come east around Samaria and up through Jericho, the road filling with pilgrims from every direction, singing the songs of ascent on the long climb. Out of the depths I cry to thee. The boy learned the lines walking. They were staying in Bethany with a friend of Joseph's, a man named Lazarus with 2 sisters. On the morning of the feast, the road bent over the shoulder of Olivet, and the temple appeared whole below them, white and gold in the morning sun, the smoke from the altar already rising. Yeshua stopped on the path. He had seen the gleam of it from the ridge above Nazareth on clear days. He had held the image in his mind for years. He did not move. Mary watched from behind and did not speak. She knew the look. She had carried him for 9 months, and she knew when he was holding still in order to keep something from breaking. When he walked again, he did not look back. The services ran 4 days, and he attended every one he was permitted to attend. He stood through all of it without moving. He watched the priests. The movements were exact. The words were exact. The meaning had gone. He watched the money changers converting foreign coin at rates he calculated before the pilgrims could argue, 40% above the honest exchange. And he watched a widow he recognized from the lane near their house count her last coins for a dove that should have cost her less than a day's bread. On the second morning, Mary took him to the edge of the court of women, beyond the carved screens at the eastern gate. She could not go. He looked at the screens, then at her. Why? Because I'm a woman. Men go further. But why? She looked at the screens instead of at him. It's the law. But why? Is it the law? Shoy had nothing. On the third morning came the consecration of the firstborn sons. A row of boys, their fathers beside them, the priests moving down the line. When Yeshua stepped forward, the line shifted, and Joseph found himself a half step behind where he had meant to stand. He did not press forward. The priest's hand was already on the boy's head. His mother watched through carved cedar from the women's court while a stranger blessed her son. The priest finished the formula and moved to the next boy. That afternoon he slipped away. The crowds were thick, Joseph absorbed with relatives. Mary at the women's gate. One moment, no one was watching him. He followed the pull, deeper through the courts, until he came to a columned portico along the south wall where scholars sat on stone benches, teachers who had spent lifetimes on a single body of text. He sat at the edge, the only child. No one looked at him. He listened. When there was a pause, he spoke. "May I ask something?" The scholars turned. The old teacher, white-bearded, nodded once. "Ask." The veil of the Holy of Holies. The high priest enters once each year. What does he find? The room went still. It was not the question they had thought a boy would ask. The old teacher leaned back. "What do you think you find?" he said. "I'm not sure. That's why I asked. The traditions offer many answers. I would like to know which one you believe." The discussion ran until the lamps had to be lit. The next morning he was already seated in the portico when the scholars arrived. Word had moved overnight. By midday, more teachers had arranged themselves in the columns. He asked about the sacrifices. If God was a father who loved his children, did he want the blood? Or was the ritual a container for something that had no other form? He asked about the 40%, and the widow with the dove. He asked about the screens that kept his mother 80 feet from the holy place. A knot of scholars from the southern school rose and walked out muttering, and one of them said, "He is from Nazareth," loud enough to be heard. The old teacher did not call them back. On the third morning, the discussion moved to the Messiah, and it was one of the younger rabbis who finally broke. A Pharisee, perhaps 30, with an educated Jerusalem accent and the particular brightness in his eyes that comes from having won many arguments. He had been to Nazareth once as a young man, and had thought, walking past its one street, that whatever he was looking for could not be found in such a place. He had built his career on that conviction. He stood. By what right? His voice cut across the portico. A child from Galilee. "Who is your teacher? What school? What authority?" The portico went quiet. Yeshua looked at him and did not look away. His hands rested open on his knees. "I don't question your traditions," he said. "I'm asking what they mean. If you study the text but can't explain what it means, perhaps we're asking the same question. You're a child. You read a copy of a text scholars have given their lives to." The portico waited. "You study the text," Yeshua said. "Quiet, deliberate, level. I listened to the one who wrote it." The portico went still. The Pharisee opened his mouth, closed it. The color had changed in his face. Then he sat down. They found him at the third hour. Mary came through the crowd with Joseph behind her and saw her son seated among the senior teachers of Israel, 12 years old, and her legs nearly went. 3 days. They had traveled a full day north before they knew he was not in the caravan, then turned back and searched every camp on the road, every gate. She pushed through and stood before him. "Son," the word came out broken, "why have you done this to us? Your father and I have been searching for you. We've been terrified." Yeshua looked at his mother. He read the 3 days in her face. The searching, the fear, 12 years of vigilance against the one moment she looked away. "Why did you need to search for me?" he said. His voice was gentle. "Did you not know that I must be about my Father's business?" Mary heard the word. Her hand went to Joseph's wrist. Joseph did not look at her. His face had set the way a man's face sets when he has been told something he is not allowed to argue with. She took her son's hand and turned him toward the gate. The boy let her take it. They left that afternoon. The old teacher watched from the gate of the portico until the road bent, and there was nothing left to see. His hand lifted once toward the boy, and he did not finish the gesture. At the bend where the city dropped behind them, the boy stopped and looked back at the temple. The smoke was still rising from the altar. Mary called his name. He stayed 1 beat longer than he should have. Then he followed. She held his hand on the road north, as she had in Alexandria when the city was too large and she needed to know exactly where he was. He was 12 now. She didn't care. He had just told 50 scholars of Israel that he listened to the voice that had written the text they had spent their lives studying. She held his hand tighter. He let her. They camped the first night below Beroth, the fires of other pilgrims scattered across the hillside. Other men slept. Joseph had carried the thing from the temple for 3 days and could carry it no further. In the portico, he kept his eyes on the coals. You said you listened to the one who wrote the text. Yeshua kept his eyes on the fire. Yeah. And to your mother you said you must be about your father's business. He turned a stick in the fire. I am your father. You are. Joseph set the stick down. Then say the rest of it. What the fathers teach their sons. That the Lord is to be feared. That he keeps the account and settles it. He looked up. Tell me you believe what your fathers believe. Once. I won't ask again. The boy did not answer fast. He never did. If I did a thing so wrong I could not undo it, he said. Would you stop being my father? Joseph answered before the word finished. No. Would you wait at the road for me? Joseph looked at the fire. You know I would. And I cannot believe the one who made you waits with less. The fire moved. Joseph had no answer. He had haggled timber with Greeks and permits with Romans. He had never been handed a thing he could not lift. He put another branch on the fire and watched it catch. He did not ask again. Not that night. Not in the years that came after. Across the fire, Mary had heard all of it. She did not speak. She drew her shawl up over the boy's shoulder where it had slipped, and she kept her peace. And she would keep it. Chapter 5. Containment. The road home was longer than the road south. Joseph walked ahead the first day. His stride had not come back. It was a small thing. The other men of the caravan did not notice. Mary noticed. The whispers had started before the caravan cleared the city gate. The carpenter's boy. The scholars who couldn't answer him. Conversations stopped when he walked past. Neighbors who had known him since infancy made room as if he had gotten wider. The news reached Nazareth before they did. Neighbors stopped him in the lane, touched his arm, studied his face. He smiled, answered politely, and went inside. Joseph closed the door and leaned against it. Well, he said, that's going to last a while. Before the evening meal, Joseph went to the flat stone behind the workshop alone. He sat with his hands quiet in his lap while the sky went the color of cooling iron. He had carried the boy out of Egypt on his back. He had taught the hands. He had taught the level. He had chosen the village no one had ever heard of, so the boy could become whatever God intended. And the boy had stood in the temple courts and named another father. Joseph took the news the way he took bad weather. He sat with it until the sky changed. Then he stood, brushed the dust from his tunic, and went back to the house. That evening, after the younger ones were asleep, He brought Yeshua out to the stone. The stars stretched north to south, thick as spilled flour. I need to understand what happened in Jerusalem, Joseph said. Yeshua pulled his knees up. I don't fully understand it myself. Try. When I sat in the teaching courts, the questions I've always carried became urgent. I couldn't hold them anymore. Joseph turned a pebble in his hand. Your mother thinks you spoke of your father, the one who isn't me. I did. Joseph turned the pebble again. Do you know what that means? I'm beginning to. The pebble clicked against another pebble. The night insects filled the silence. I don't know how to be your father, Joseph said, not knowing what I know, not knowing what I don't know. You've been my father every day of my life, the one who taught me to measure twice, to work with the grain, to listen to what the wood wants before I force it into what I want. Yeshua's voice was steady and quiet. Whatever else I am, I'm your son. I want to be your son. Joseph's hand found his shoulder and stayed there. After a while, he said, You'll need to be careful. I know. Can you? Yeshua looked at the dark valley below them. I can try. Joseph studied him. He measured the gap between what the boy was saying and what the boy could deliver. He did not name it. All right, he said. All right. The workshop felt smaller than he remembered. Joseph handed him a plane, and they worked side by side, a curl of shavings falling to the floor. He let himself sink into it, the honesty of wood. No neighbors scanning his face for signs. But his mind kept going to the temple, the veil, the silence that had dropped over the portico. Joseph glanced at him. You're not here. Yeshua looked down. The board had a divot where his palm had pressed too hard. Sorry. Don't be sorry. Just be here. Joseph took the board, ran his thumb across the gouge, and set it on the shelf where the rejects lived. He ran his palm over the next board and said, half under his breath, mostly to the wood was here before us. He picked up a fresh board and started again. Slower this time, matching his breath to the stroke. The weeks passed and the talk did not die down. Mary watched him. She watched when he walked to the well, when he spoke at synagogue. Her face lit when he entered a room. Her shoulders dropped when nothing extraordinary happened. One evening, Joseph stopped in the doorway and watched her watch the boy across the courtyard, and saw the corner of her mouth move, the small movement of a woman holding a hope that was costing her. He did not go in. He turned back to the workshop and worked another hour by lamplight. He did not speak of it to her. She did not speak of it to him. They had not yet found the word for what they were watching. One Sabbath, the Chazan stopped him after the service. The boys had gone. The men had gone. The Chazan stood at the reading table with a scroll open. Yeshua, he turned. The Chazan kept his eyes on the scroll. A passage. I have been turning it for a week. Ezekiel? The chariot. The wheels within wheels. The eyes on the rims. He looked up. What do you think it means? The portico fell into his chest. The boy who had silenced the senior teachers of Israel looked at the man who had taught him to read. The four faces are the cherubim, he said. The wheels are the throne. The throne moves where the Lord wills. He stopped there. The Chazan did not move. He kept his eyes on Yeshua's face. He knew the boy was lying. He knew the boy knew he knew. His hand lifted toward the scroll, perhaps toward Yeshua, and did not finish. He folded the scroll and set it on the table. Thank you, the Chazan said. He did not look up again. Yeshua walked out of the synagogue. He did not look at his father on the path home. On the ridge that evening, he sat alone on the flat stone. The wind had not changed. The valley had not changed. The pressure behind his ribs had grown another finger's width since he sat down. He opened his mouth. He did not know what to call the one he was addressing. He did not know if the address was reaching anything. He had only the warmth in his chest that was older than his bones and the silence of the stars over the valley. "I will hold," he said, "as long as you ask me to, but you will have to tell me what you want me to do." The wind moved in the olive trees below the ridge. He waited. He waited longer. Then he stood up and walked down the hill to his mother's house, because he did not want his sister Martha to grow up the way he had grown up. Joseph came to him one evening late when the house was quiet. "I've been setting money aside," he said. He sat down on the workshop bench and rubbed his hands on his knees. "For your education. There's a school in Jerusalem. Gamaliel teaches there. When you're 15. A proper course of study. You'd live there. Years, maybe." Yeshua looked up from the chisel he was sharpening. "How long have you been saving?" "Since before you were born." The chisel was sharp enough. He kept sharpening it. In the corner of the workshop, on the shelf above the iron tools, sat a clay jar with a wooden lid. He had seen Joseph touch the lid sometimes when he came in from a long day. He had never lifted it. He knew now what was inside. "The scholars there would challenge you," Joseph said. "Push you. You wouldn't have to hold back." The hope in his father's voice. Yeshua set the chisel down. "I'd like that. I'd like that very much." Joseph smiled. It rearranged his whole face. "Good. We'll make it happen." He walked out of the workshop with his shoulders set differently than when he had walked in. Lighter. He had finally put something down. Yeshua watched him cross the yard in the last light. He looked at the clay jar on the shelf. 15 years of shaving. He did not pray about it. He did not ask for a different answer. He sat in the workshop with the chisel in his lap and let the feeling be what it was. Mary mentioned Elizabeth once that winter. She was kneading bread and her hands stopped halfway through the fold. Elizabeth has gone quiet. The cousin's mother. No word in over a year. Yeshua was at the table with a wooden bowl in his hand. "The boy," he said. "In the wilderness, I think. She does not write." She went back to the bread. He did not ask anything else. He was 14 now. He worked. He studied. He played his harp on quiet evenings, the only hours when the thing inside him could move without cost. And Mary would pause in the doorway and listen, one hand closed at her collar, and go back inside before the song ended. Late one night, Joseph sat in the workshop alone with the lamp burning low. He lifted the wooden lid off the clay jar, took the day's coins from his pocket, and counted them in. The jar was a little more than half full. The boy was almost as tall as he was. He put the lid back and set the jar on the shelf in the place where his hand always returned to it. He did not blow out the lamp. He sat on the bench in the lamplight and looked at the jar. Chapter 6. The Brothers. The argument started over a fig. Miriam had wrapped it in cloth and set it on the high shelf for Simon, sick all week, and James found it before the boy woke and ate it. By the time the screaming reached the workshop, Simon was wailing, and Joseph Jr. was shouting something indistinct that ended in mine. Joseph looked up from his bench, and Yeshua set down the chisel and crossed the yard, while his father turned back to the wood. He found Miriam with James by the collar, Simon crying in the corner, and Martha on the bench eating an olive and watching. He knelt first to Simon, promised him another fig after lunch, and set him down before he told James next time to ask. James folded his arms. "Ask who?" "You." Their father was 30 feet away in the workshop. Yeshua left the house. Jude followed him into the workshop that afternoon and took the low stool by the door and watched the plane move. and Yeshua handed him a piece of scrap cedar and told him that one was his. Jude held it in both hands until Mary called them to eat, and carried it to bed that night. One Sabbath at synagogue, the Shazan asked a question about the prophets. James raised his hand, gave a good answer, correct, thorough. Then the Shazan asked a second question, harder, and looked at the back of the room. James saw it. He had been watching for it since the temple year, and he caught it before he meant to look. The Shazan's eyes had not even reached Yeshua before Yeshua's lips were already moving silently. He was not answering the Shazan. He was answering something else, and his mouth was finishing it before the Shazan finished asking. James saw the silent moving of his older brother's mouth. The Shazan did not call on Yeshua. He answered his own question and moved on. James said nothing on the walk home. He went to bed facing the wall. Joseph said it at the workbench a week later. He had been working a piece of acacia, and Yeshua was sanding the long edge across from him. Outside, James was building a small cart from scraps and not speaking to anyone. "Your brother is going to break something," Joseph said. His eyes did not leave the wood. "He's competing with something he can't outwork. I haven't found a way to tell him that doesn't make it worse." Yeshua's hand stopped on the wood. "He'll figure it out," Joseph said. "Or he won't. But there's no fix from the outside." Yeshua kept sanding. He did not look up. They fought in the yard one afternoon in late spring. A real fight. James threw the first punch because a neighbor boy had said, "Your brother's the smart one, right?" And James had walked home with the sentence eating through him. James swung, hit him in the jaw. Hard enough to turn his head. Yeshua looked at him, not with anger, as if he had been waiting for it. James hit him again. Yeshua caught his wrist. "Stop. Let go of me. I will, when you stop." James pulled against the grip and could not break it. "You don't get to tell me what to do. You're not my father." The yard went quiet. Simon stopped running. Martha looked up from the dirt. Jude pressed himself against the doorframe. Yeshua released his brother's wrist. James stood there, breathing hard, fists still clenched, eyes wet with something that was not tears, because James did not cry, had not cried since he was 6. "No," Yeshua said, "I'm not your father." He walked back into the workshop, picked up the plane, started working. Joseph found out. Of course he did. He sat with James that evening on the flat stone behind the workshop, the place where difficult things were said in the dark. Yeshua could hear them through the wall, not the words, the cadence. Joseph's voice low and steady. James's higher, cracking once, recovering. He knew what Joseph would say, because Joseph always said the same thing, in different forms, calibrated to the child. "Tell me what happened. Now tell me the part you left out. Now tell me what you're actually angry about." The last one was the hard one. James would circle. Joseph would let him circle. Miriam cornered Yeshua 2 days later at the well. "James isn't speaking to you." "I noticed." She hauled on the rope. "He thinks you think you're better than him. I don't." She drew the water up and set the jar on the rim. Her arms were strong for 11. "I know you don't. He doesn't know that. Because you never tell him anything. You never tell any of us anything. You walk around holding whatever it is, and you never set it down. And we watch you and we worry, and you don't notice. I noticed." She lifted the jar to her hip. "Then act like it." She carried the water inside. He stood at the well with the rope still in his hands. That evening he found James in the yard, whittling a stick with Joseph's knife. The blade was too big for his hand. Yeshua sat down beside him. Not close, not far. The distance of a brother, not an authority. "What are you making?" "Nothing." A long curl of wood fell to the ground. A spear. Silence. The sound of the blade on wood. The evening insects starting up. The neighbor boy was wrong, Yeshua said. The one who said what he said. He doesn't know anything about either of us. James went back to whittling. The blade moved. Easy for you to say. It's not, actually. James looked at him. The look lasted 3 seconds. Neither blinked. James's breathing slowed, and his grip on the knife loosened half an inch. He went back to the spear. It's going to be crooked if you keep cutting against the grain, Yeshua said. I know. Yeshua watched the blade. Want me to show you? A pause. The blade stopped. Fine. Yeshua took the stick, rotated it, showed him where the grain ran, how the wood wanted to be cut, where to let the knife follow, and where to resist. Abba showed me on my first day in the shop. He hasn't shown me anything. He will. Ask him. James took the stick back, cut along the grain this time. The curl fell clean. Neither of them said anything else. They sat in the yard while the light died and the stars came, and Joseph's voice carried from the workshop where he was teaching Joseph Jr. to sand a plank. Yeshua came home one afternoon to find Martha alone in the kitchen, standing on a stool, stirring a pot that was too big for her. Miriam had gone to help a neighbor. The lentils had burned at the bottom. Martha had been stirring the top layer faithfully while the bottom turned to char. I know, she said. I can smell it. He lifted her off the stool, set her on the bench, scraped the pot, salvaged what he could. She told me not to stop stirring. I didn't stop. You did great. She looked into the pot. The bottom burned. The bottom always burns if you don't scrape. That's not your fault. Miriam should have told you to scrape. Martha considered this. Her face, already loyally, processing the distinction between instruction followed and instruction incomplete. Next time I'll scrape. Next time you'll scrape. She ate her lentils without complaint. The charred ones, too. Late at night, the house asleep, Mary sat with Joseph in the front room, the lamp burning low, their voices meant to travel no further than each other. Yeshua lay on his mat and listened, not because he was spying, because the house was small and their voices carried. James hit him, Mary said. I know. Mary pulled her shawl tighter. It's getting worse. It's getting harder. That's different. He's 12. He's competing with something he can't outwork. Yeshua heard his father say it for the second time. He lay on his mat with his eyes open. What do we do? Mary said. We love them both. We give James his own space, his own work, things he can be best at without the comparison. Mary waited, and Yeshua. Joseph was quiet a moment. Yeshua carries something I don't understand. I stopped trying to understand it. I just try to give him room. They spoke of the school then, and the number, and the years it would take. And Joseph rubbed his face with hands rough from the work. His eyes went to the shelf above the iron tools where the clay jar sat in the dark. The lamp would not reach that high. He knew where it was anyway. He had touched the lid every night for almost 15 years. He listens to someone else, Mary. I hear him do it. On the roof, on the ridge. He turned his hand over in his lap. I'm afraid I'm not enough for him. I'm afraid I never was. I'm a carpenter. What do I have to teach a boy who listens to that? Mary reached across and took his hand. None of us are enough for him, she said. That was never the job. The job was to love him until he could stand on his own. You've done that every day since Egypt. Joseph said nothing. After a while, his fingers closed around hers. And if ready means leaving, he said. The lamp flickered. A moth hit the flame and fell away. Then we let him go. He lay in the dark after they stopped talking. He turned on his mat and pulled the blanket up. The thing behind his ribs hummed low. He breathed with it. The house breathed around him. Chapter 7. The Catastrophe. The runner came at midday. September. Late heat. The vineyards heavy with fruit and the air thick with the smell of crushed grapes from the press down the hill. Yeshua was in the shop, planing cedar boards for a cabinet the Romans had ordered. 14 now. His fingers knew the work without his mind following. The runner appeared in the shop doorway. A young man, breathing hard, sandals caked with road dust. He gripped the doorframe, and his knuckles were white, and he would not look up. Yeshua's hand stopped on the plane. "Your father," the runner said. "There's been an accident." The words came in fragments. Derrick failure. The governor's new residence at Sepphoris. Joseph had been working the upper scaffolding. The support gave way. How bad? The runner studied the ground between his feet. They're asking for his family. Yeshua set the plane down. The cedar board sat half-finished on the bench, the grain half exposed, the surface half smooth. He left it there. Mary was mending in the back room. She looked up, saw the runner's face, then her son's, and her hand stopped on the cloth. He told her. The construction site. The fall. "I have to go to him," she said. "Someone has to stay with the children. James can walk with me. You stay." Miriam had appeared in the doorway, already reaching for Jude. "But I should. Yeshua." She gripped his arm. Her fingers pressed through the fabric to bone. "If something happens, you need to be here. They need you here." She kissed his forehead. Then she was gathering her shawl, calling for James, moving toward the door. At the threshold she turned. "Tell him I'm coming." She was gone. He fed the children lunch. That was the first thing. Simon was hungry. Martha was hungry. Joseph Jr. had skinned his knee and needed it washed and wrapped. Jude stood in the corner of the kitchen and would not eat and would not speak and would not stop watching the door. Simon appeared in the doorway holding a wooden horse Joseph had carved him. "Where's Zima?" She went to see Abba. He got hurt at work. "Is he going to be okay?" Yeshua knelt, looked his brother in the face. "I don't know yet." Simon's lip trembled. His fist tightened around the horse. "Can I sit with you?" "Yes." Simon climbed onto the bench and pressed himself against Yeshua's side. He was warm and small, and he did not ask any more questions. The afternoon stretched. Every sound from the road made Yeshua's chest seize. He prayed. Not the formal words. "Please, not yet. We need him." Martha brought him a cup of water. She was 9. Her face was very serious, and she said, "Drink this, you'll feel better," in exactly Mary's voice. He drank. The light moved across the floor of the workshop. He left his father's plane where Joseph had set it, the board half smooth in the vise. If he kept it that way, Joseph would have to come back. You don't leave work half finished. He sat on the bench. Simon had fallen asleep against his arm. The shadows lengthened. They brought the body at sunset. A cart, neighbors walking alongside, Mary and James trailing behind. Yeshua met them at the edge of the yard. He did not need to ask. He could see it in how the men carried the cart. Careful pace. The cloth draped over a shape that was not moving and would never move again. Joseph had died before Mary arrived. Mary reached Yeshua and her legs gave. The sound that came from her chest was not a word. He caught her against him. Her small hand pressed flat against his chest, the same hand that had held him to her in the donkey's stride out of Bethlehem, when his ribs had been smaller than her palm. Her hand had not grown. His chest had. The children came to the door. Joseph Jr. first, then Martha, then Simon still holding the wooden horse. They stood in a line in the fading light and watched their mother weep against their brother. "It's going to be all right," Yeshua said. He held her. They buried him the next morning. The whole village came. 8 of them at the graveside, the smallest ones looking around, confused by the crying. James stood beside Yeshua, 12 years old, his face wet, his lips pressed white, trying. When the prayers ended, Yeshua knelt and placed his palm on the fresh earth, still warm from the September sun. He did not speak. He pressed it flat against the dirt, the way you press your hand against a door that has just closed. When he stood, the Shazan was a step behind him. The man had not been able to say the boy's name since the Sabbath he had asked about the chariot. He did not say it now. He put his hand on Yeshua's shoulder and kept it there a moment. The hand was heavier than the boy expected. Then he took it away and walked back through the mourners. Late that night, Yeshua sat in the dark workshop alone. He had not lit the lamp. A small shape came to the doorway. Jude, 6 years old. The blanket from his bed wrapped around his shoulders. He crossed the floor without speaking and stopped beside the bench. He held out the scrap of cedar Yeshua had given him in the summer, the one he carried everywhere, the one he had been sleeping with since the funeral. He pressed it into Yeshua's palm. He stood there a while, then he took it back. He went to bed. Yeshua's hand stayed open after Jude had gone. He missed his father. His teeth hurt. After the mourners had gone, he sat with his mother in the quiet house. The lamps burned low. What are we going to do? Her voice was thin. He had been turning the numbers all day. 14 denarii owed to the wood merchant. The cabinet for the Romans half paid. 3 orders in the ledger in Joseph's handwriting that nobody would complete at Joseph's rate. "I'll take over the shop." Her head came up. "You're 14. I know, but I can do the work. He taught me." She looked at him. The calluses on his fingers, the width of his shoulders in the lamplight. "You were meant for more than this," she said. "Maybe. Someday." He took her hand. "Right now, there are 7 children in this house who need to eat. That's what matters." She cried again. He held her. After a while, she said, "Your hands look like his now." She left him there. The lamp was still burning when he stood. He crossed the shop to the high shelf above the iron tools. He had to step on the bench to reach it. The clay jar with the wooden lid that his father had touched every night for 15 years. He brought it down and poured the contents onto the bench. It made a sound he had never heard. 15 years of shavings, coins the color of cooled iron, and coins almost black with age. 1 gold piece from a job at the synagogue 10 years ago that Joseph had refused to spend, even when the wood merchant came twice for the same debt. He counted. The number he reached was not the number Joseph had told Mary the night they talked about Gamaliel. It was lower. Joseph had counted in good months. The bad months had taken some back. It was still more than the wood merchant was owed. He counted out 14 denarii into a leather pouch. He returned the rest to the jar, put the lid back on, climbed up on the bench, and set the jar on the shelf in the place where his father's hand had always returned to it. He stepped down. His own hand stayed in the air a moment, as if it were Joseph's. He brought it back to his side. He went to Sepphoris the week after the burial. Joseph was owed 3 months of wages. The figure in the workshop ledger, Joseph's script, exact as everything he did. The contractor's name was Ezra, a thick man with soft hands who ran crews he never worked alongside. He received Yeshua in an outer room with a single chair and did not offer it. "I'm here for my father's wages. 3 months. The amount is in his ledger." Ezra looked at him. 14. Sawdust still in his hair, wearing Joseph's second tunic, too wide in the shoulders. "Your father's work was unfinished," Ezra said. "The derrick failure set us back weeks. The Derrick failure killed my father. The room sat in that. Ezra looked at the doorway as if expecting someone older to walk through it. He looked back. An unfortunate accident. His wages. Ezra leaned back. I can offer half. The ledger says full. The contractor turned a stylus in his hand and set it down. 60%, not a denarius more. And the boy finishes the cabinet work himself. Agreed. They did not shake hands. He walked back to Nazareth with his father's wages in a leather pouch against his ribs. He counted them 3 times on the road. He did not feel proud. The months after were a single long day that would not end. He finished the contracts. Clients who had wanted his father's work got a boy's work instead. And some of them said so, and he finished the work anyway. Mary held Jude. She heated broth and let it boil over. She stood in doorways and looked at things she couldn't name. He did not push her. He noticed the stride one afternoon walking back from the wood merchant. It was not his stride. It was the slower one his father had carried since Jerusalem. Yeshua had not put it on. He had not noticed when his body had taken it. He walked the rest of the way home in it. He did not change it. On clear nights, he climbed the ridge. He sat where Joseph used to sit and let his feet hang over the edge. The stone was still warm from the day. He did not let himself think about the moment between the crack of the timber and the ground. He had carried the question for 3 months and had not opened it. He did not open it now. He looked at the stars his father had named for him. Below him, the house was quiet. 7 children, fed and warm, and sleeping because of him. He was 15 now. When the cold came, he stood and walked back down the hill, because the children would wake hungry, and the workshop opened at dawn. Chapter 8. The firstborn, 15, his father dead, his mother in bed, a baby that wouldn't stop crying. The labor started before dawn. Mary called for him. Not the midwife, not Miriam, him. He found her in the back room, both hands white on the bed frame, her face a color he had never seen on a living person. He sent James running for the midwife, sent the younger ones next door. He boiled water because that was what you did. Held her hand and she crushed his fingers and he did not pull away. Between contractions, she panted and stared at the ceiling and whispered Joseph's name. The midwife arrived in time for the birth itself. They named her Ruth. Small, red-faced, a scream too large for the body making it. Mary held her for a few minutes. Then she handed her to Yeshua. I can't. Not yet, I'm sorry, I can't. Her fingers uncurled one by one, like she was prying them open herself. He took the baby. She fit in the crook of his arm. Mary turned her face to the wall. He learned to change her, to warm goat's milk and hold the soaked cloth to her mouth when Mary could not nurse, to walk the length of the house at 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, 5, the baby against his shoulder, his feet tracing the same path on the packed earth floor, until the crying stopped, or the sun came up, whichever happened first. James watched from the doorway one night. 13 years old. Arms crossed. Why'd you get to be in charge? Yeshua kept walking. The baby had finally quieted, and any change in rhythm would start her again. I'm only 2 years younger, James said. It's not fair. You're right. It's not. James pushed off the doorframe. Then why? Because Ima asked me, and because I can. James stood there, fists at his sides, wanting to fight, but having no target that would hold still long enough. Go to bed, James. You're not my father. Ruth stirred against Yeshua's neck. No, he said, I'm not. James stood there, wanting him to say more. Then he went to bed. Yeshua kept walking. The prayers became a problem. Every evening the family gathered, because Joseph had led worship every night of his life, and Yeshua would do the same. But the old prayers sat dead in the children's mouths. Memorized words. Eyes glazed. James staring at the wall with the specific hostility of a boy who has been told to perform grief on a schedule. "Mean it," Yeshua told them one evening. "Don't say the words. Talk to God like you're actually talking to someone who's listening. Say what you're feeling, what you want, what you're thankful for." Silence. Then Simon, 9 years old, squeezing his eyes shut. "God, please fix my sandal. It has a hole, and make James stop taking my things." Martha went next. "God, bring Abba back." The room went still. Yeshua looked at the ceiling. His throat closed. "That's good, Martha. That's honest. God hears that." James would not pray. James sat with his arms crossed and his mouth shut for 4 nights running. And on the 5th night, Yeshua did not make him stay. "What if I give you a way to start?" he thought. "Just the opening. A frame. A bowl for the words." "Our Father," he said one evening, "who is in heaven." "Ours left," James said from the doorway. The lamp guttered. Ruth shifted against Yeshua's shoulder. Yeshua looked at the ceiling, then at his brother. "That one left," he said. "This one stayed." James studied him, then sat down. "Our Father who is in heaven," Yeshua said again. "Hallowed be your name. Your kingdom come. Your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven." Simon opened one eye. What does hallowed mean? It means sacred, set apart. It means when you say God's name, you mean it. Simon nodded. "Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors." James's head came up. Yeshua saw his brother hear it, and hold it, and say nothing, and lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Silence. Simon closed his eyes and said the whole thing back, start to finish, with 2 words wrong and his fists clenched in concentration. Martha whispered it with him. Joseph Jr. mouthed it from the corner. James did not say it aloud, but his lips moved once at the end on the word evil, then stopped. He looked at Yeshua. A half second. Yeshua looked away, gave him that. The weeks went on. He kept the books, every denarius tracked, and the math never came out right. The clay jar on the high shelf was nearly empty. He had taken to touching the lid when he came in at the end of the day. He had not meant to start. One evening he told his mother they would need to sell the house Joseph owned on the other side of town. His half of it. It would clear the debts and keep them through winter. She looked at him from the far place she'd been living since Joseph died. And then I work harder. Her eyes went to his hands. "You're 15. "I know." She closed her eyes. When she opened them, she looked at him. His mother. "Here. You shouldn't have to do this." "No, but I do." The tax collector came in August, a small man with a ledger and a way of looking at things as if measuring what they'd bring. His eyes moved through the house before his feet did. The loom, the copper pot, the oil lamp. He was pricing the room without putting numbers to anything. The assessment is overdue, with penalties. Yeshua showed him the accounts, asked for time. Time cost money. The man walked in. He stopped at the bench and ran his thumb along the joint where the apron rail met the leg. "Your father built my brother's door 12 years ago. The door is still square." Man knew his work. Yeshua watched the stranger's thumb on his father's joint. "Thank you." "The work doesn't pay the assessment." He stepped past Yeshua, reached up and plucked the bottom string of the harp with one finger. The note hung in the room longer than the man's attention. That looks valuable. It stays. The man let the note die out. Everything finds a price eventually. Yeshua did not move. The harp stays. The man crossed to the corner, knelt, ran his thumb along the lid of the wooden case, the same slow stroke Joseph used to give it. Yeshua watched the stranger's hand on the lid Joseph had oiled every month of his remembered life. The scriptures then, Greek translation, worth quite a bit. You have until the Sabbath, Yeshua said. After that, whatever's still here is mine. The man did not close the door behind him. The lamp had burned down twice before Yeshua moved. He stood. He went to the corner of the workshop, the bundle wrapped in rough sacking, undisturbed since Joseph laid it there 12 years ago. He pulled the sacking off the case for the first time in his life. Cedar underneath was the color it had been the day Joseph finished it. The joints were perfect. No gap, no give. He ran his thumb along the lid where his father's thumb had passed 1,000 times. He opened it. The scrolls smelled like Alexandria, like oil and harbor salt, and the room where strangers had wept over a sleeping child. He closed the lid. He sat on the bench with the case across his knees in the dark. The pressure behind his sternum did not press. It did not pull. It sat in him and was quiet in a way it had not been quiet since the temple. He stood up. The next morning he carried the case through the streets to the synagogue. The village watched him carry the scriptures. No one stopped him. No one helped. A maturity offering, he said, to the Lord. The Shazan opened the lid slowly. He lifted the first scroll out, as if the cedar might come apart in his hands. His own hand was trembling. It was the same hand that had rested on Yeshua's shoulder at his father's grave. This is, where did your family? It's what my father would have wanted. The Shazan did not look up from the scroll. It will stay here, he said, until you're ready. Yeshua walked out of the synagogue. He sold his father's half of the property for less than it was worth. The collector took the assessment before the Sabbath and left. His 15th birthday fell on the Sabbath. In the law, the threshold, a boy became a man. He could read scripture in public, could be counted, could speak. The synagogue was full. The carpenter's son who had silenced the temple scholars 3 years ago. The boy who had held a family together. The young man who had just given away the most valuable thing he owned. Yeshua stood before them, thin from a year of hunger, hands calloused from a year of work. Wearing a tunic Mary had let out twice, he opened the scroll of the prophets, found the passage, and read. Seek good and not evil that you may live, and so the Lord, the God of hosts, shall be with you. His voice was thinner than he wanted it to be, but it didn't shake. What does the Lord require of you but to deal justly, love mercy, and walk humbly with your God? He lowered the scroll, looked out at them. The whole room had leaned toward him, every face waiting for the thing the carpenter's son had held since the temple. The words rose, as they always rose. They sat behind his teeth, fully formed. The room would have held still for them. This is the word of the Lord, he said, and rolled the scroll closed, and sat down. The Shazan's hands were trembling. He had known this would happen. He had not known it would feel like this. Yeshua walked out into the bright afternoon. People approached him, touched his sleeve, asked for blessings. An old woman wept. He answered what could be answered. He kept walking. Inside the workshop, he closed the door. He pressed his forehead against the bench, the cedar smell. The limestone wall his palms had pressed flat against the night his father had forbidden him to draw. He stayed there until the shaking stopped. He came out in the late sat in the workshop with the baby sleeping against his chest and the smell of cedar in the dark. On the bench beside the lamp was a small carved animal he had not put there. A goat or a calf, it was hard to tell, made by a hand that was learning. He recognized the hand. He did not know when Joseph Jr. had left it. He picked it up. He turned it over. He set it down by the lamp. Chapter 9. The Yoke. He was 15 when the mother walked in with her dead child. The workshop still smelled like Joseph. Cedar shavings, leather, the oil Joseph used on the plane blades. 8 months since the accident. And sometimes Yeshua still expected to see his father at the workbench when he came in before dawn. The woman came at first light. She stood in the doorway with the sun behind her. The shape of a woman holding herself against something that had come loose inside her, afraid of what would fall out if she moved wrong. "Are you the carpenter's son?" His thumb found the grain of the plane handle, worn smooth where Joseph's fingers had gone. "I am the carpenter." She came into the light. He knew her a little. A weaver's wife from the far side of the village. She was holding a small cloth bundle against her chest. "My daughter," she said, "last night." "How old?" Her arms tightened around the bundle. 7. Yeshua set the plane on the bench. "I have some money." She opened the bundle. A few coins, less than half of what he would need for the cedar. "I know it isn't enough. I can bring more when my husband's next wages come in. He's in Sephora's, he doesn't know yet." He glanced at the high shelf where the jar sat almost empty. He looked back at the woman. "That will be enough." "It isn't." He was already reaching for the cedar. "It will be." She tried to say something else. No sound came. She nodded once. "When?" "By dusk." She pressed the coins into his palm. Her hand was cold. Then she was gone. He put the coins in the box under the bench. He selected the cedar. The saw moved. 7 years old. He measured with the length of his forearm and took a hand's width off for the shoulders. Too small for an adult, too large for a doll. He ran the plane along the first board. Slow. The shavings came up thin and pale. Halfway through the second pass, the grain split under his blade in a shape he knew. He did not look away. He set the blade on the bench. He waited until his hand stopped shaking. Then he picked up the blade and kept cutting. James appeared in the doorway around mid-morning. He was supposed to be at school. Yeshua did not ask why he wasn't. James stood in the doorway and looked at the 4 cedar boards laid out on the workshop floor. He did not ask whose it was. He walked to the shelf. He took down a soft cloth and a small pot of beeswax. He sat on a low stool across from Yeshua and polished the first board. They worked. The saw, the plane, the cloth on the grain. Once James asked for the finer chisel and Yeshua handed it to him without looking up. Once Yeshua needed the board steadied and James's hand was already there. Neither said anything about what they were building. Around midday, Yeshua glanced up and saw that James had finished the long side and moved on to the second without being told. His brother's hands were careful, more careful than Yeshua had seen them on anything. Mary came at noon with bread and a cup of water, the same bread she had brought every day since Joseph died, because bringing it was a thing she could do. She set the bread on the bench. She saw the shape on the floor. She stood very still. She did not ask who it was for. She looked at the small cedar box taking form under her son's hands, and her own hands moved once to her mouth and then down to her sides. And she turned and walked out of the workshop without speaking. He ate the bread standing, as his father used to. The box came together in the afternoon. The mitered corners. The bottom panel set in a shallow rabbet so the weight would not hang on the nails. He drove each nail with 2 strikes of the hammer. not 3. 3 would split the cedar. James finished the polishing, went outside without being asked, came back with a handful of dried lavender from the kitchen garden and set it on the bench next to the box and did not say anything about it. Yeshua looked at the lavender. Then he looked at his brother. James was looking at the box. He had laid out the lavender in the rough shape of a child. Yeshua laid the lavender in the bottom. It barely covered the cedar. He took a strip of linen from the rag pile, the last clean one of Joseph's old shirts. He laid it over the lavender. He fitted the lid, checked the seat. It closed without a sound. James stood up from the stool. He looked at the box once more. Then he walked out of the workshop and toward the house without speaking. Yeshua sat down on the bench. The woman came back at dusk. Her husband was with her, a thin man with the shoulders of someone who worked stone. His face had not been told how to hold itself yet. His hand moved once toward the box on the workbench, stopped halfway, and fell back to his side. Yeshua carried the box out to them. It was light. A 7-year-old weighed almost nothing. The cedar weighed less. The mother looked at it. "It's beautiful," she said. "It's a box. It's beautiful." She reached into the folds of her shawl. Her hand came out holding something small and gold. A ring. Thin band. A single amber stone. Her mother had kept it, and her mother's mother before that. She held it out. "The price was fair," he said. She pushed the ring at him. "Take it." "I can't." He set it on the bench between them and drew his hand back. "Please?" She picked the ring up from the bench. She did not put it away. She crossed the step between them and took his hand and pressed the ring into his palm and closed his fingers around it with both of her hands. She held his closed fist. Then she kissed the back of his hand, the way you kiss a priest. And she turned and walked away with her husband, carrying the small cedar box between them down the dusty street. Yeshua stood in the doorway and watched them go until they turned the corner by the olive press. The ring was warm in his palm. Lentils again that night. James was already at the low table. He had not said a word since leaving the workshop. He ate without complaint. Jude sat close to Yeshua and watched him as he had every evening since the funeral. Simon broke the quiet. "Can we have meat? Just once. Next month." "You said that last month." Yeshua's voice dropped half an octave. "Simon, eat the lentils. Be grateful there are lentils." Then he put a hand on Simon's shoulder. "There will be meat, I promise. Just not yet." There was one piece of bread left in the basket. Simon's plate was scraped. Yeshua tore the bread in half. He set the bigger piece in front of Simon. He ate what was on his own plate. Jude had been quiet all evening. He set down his spoon, and in his small, serious voice, to no one in particular, he repeated a phrase he had heard a Roman teamster shout at a mule that afternoon by the spring. He did not know what it meant. He said it carefully, getting the hard foreign sounds right. The table stopped. Martha's eyes went round. Simon's mouth fell open in pure joy. Miriam said Jude in exactly Mary's voice, and Yeshua laughed. It came up out of him before he could stop it. A real laugh from the floor of his chest. His eyes ran. Jude, encouraged, said it again, and that was worse. And Yeshua put his head down on his arms and shook. James stared at his brother. He had not seen this in a year. None of them had. In the back room where she had gone to sit with the dark, Mary heard her son laugh. She pressed her hand to her mouth. She had waited a year for it without letting herself know she was waiting. It came through the wall and undid her, and she wept where no one could see. Then she dried her face. and came out, because the pot needed scouring, and you'd do the thing in front of you. After the children were in bed, Mary came and stood in the doorway of the workshop. She did not come in. She looked at the place on the floor where the box had been that morning, and at the lamp, and at her son. Her hand rested for a moment on the doorframe, where Joseph's hand used to rest when he came to call her for the evening meal. Then she turned and went back into the house. He sat on his father's bench in the quiet. The harp the tax collector had not taken was against the wall behind him. He reached for it. He set it across his knees. He did not play it. He held it. The wood still held the day's heat. The strings caught the lamplight. He set the harp back against the wall. On the bench was a piece of charcoal that had fallen out of the lamp tray. His hand picked it up before he had decided to pick it up. On the cedar offcut beside the lamp, his hand made a line. The line was the curve of a shoulder. The shoulder was Joseph's. He stopped before the shoulder finished. He did not wipe it. He set the charcoal back down. The half curve sat on the cedar. The lamp burned over it. He checked the fire, checked the door. He lay down on the bench where Joseph used to nap. The bench was too short for him now. The ring was in his pocket. He had not taken it out to look at it. He could feel it against his hip. 8 people breathing in the dark. Chapter 10, The Zealot. He was 17 when they asked him to lead the revolution. The recruiters came to Nazareth that spring. They arrived with the caravans, as such men always did, traveling as merchants, speaking quietly in corners. A message spread through the village, like fire finding dry grass. Rome could be resisted. Rome must be resisted. Yeshua sat in the back of the gathering and heard them out. They quoted the prophets. They invoked the Maccabees. They painted pictures of a restored Israel, free and proud. The young men around him leaned forward. When they asked who would join, half the room stood up. Yeshua stayed seated. James found him in the workshop that evening, cleaning tools by lamplight. 15 now, arms crossed, face tight. You didn't stand. No. James stepped inside. Everyone saw. Everyone noticed. They're talking about you, saying you're a coward, saying Joseph's son has no spine. Yeshua set down the plane he was oiling and looked at his brother. What do you think? I think we've been pushed around long enough. I think someone has to do something. He stopped, swallowed. I think Father would have wanted us to fight. Father wanted us to survive. James took a step closer. Then we just sit here. We just take it. We have 7 siblings depending on us. James's fists clenched at his sides. That's always your answer. The family, the responsibility. You didn't have to ask. It was given. The workshop went quiet. Outside, Martha was calling the younger ones in for supper. The recruiters are coming back, James said. They want to talk to you specifically. They think you could lead something. The moderates. The ones who want to resist but aren't ready for violence. They need someone who can talk, who can think. He paused. And if you say no, they'll find someone else. And that someone might be me. Isaac, the moneylender, came to the workshop on a market day. He walked through the door without knocking, surveyed the workspace, and sat down on a stool without being invited. He sat there for a full minute, watching Yeshua work. His left hand opened and closed on his knee, a habit or a wound. My son worked stone in Sepphoris, he said. 2 years ago, a Roman patrol accused him of stealing. They beat him in the street. He died 3 days later. No one was punished. No one was named. A long quiet. His name was. The hand closed. I haven't said it out loud, Sin. Yeshua's hand stopped on the wood. I've been watching you since then, Isaac said. Every week I hear something new. The merchant from Tyre who says you argued Torah with him in Greek and won. The widow whose roof you fixed for free. The creditor you stared down when you were 15. He leaned forward. You're the only person in this village I can't predict. The plane kept moving. I'm a carpenter. I've been lending money for 30 years. I know men. I know the ones who are what they seem, and the ones who aren't. You're not what you seem. Yeshua set down the plane. Turned. What do you want, Isaac? Your family is drowning. I know the numbers. 8 children, 1 income. A mother who can barely hold herself together. Isaac's hands were gripping his knees. I can make all of that go away. Debts cleared. Education funded. Your siblings set for a generation. The moderate patriots need a voice. Someone young enough to inspire. Someone like you. Yeshua looked at him for a long moment. You want to buy me. I want to invest in the only person in this village worth investing in. Outside, the market noise went on. I need time. Of course. Isaac stood. At the door, he turned back. I've waited 2 years. I can wait a few more days. His mother cornered him that evening. Isaac told me about his offer. Mary's voice was careful. It's generous. It's a bribe. She set down the cloth in her hands. It's an opportunity. For you. For all of us. Mother, you know what you told me about my birth. About the angel. Her face went still. They rarely spoke of this. That's exactly why you should do this, she said. You're meant to lead Israel. The angel said you would sit on David's throne. That's not what the angel meant. She turned to face him. How do you know? I don't. Not entirely, but I know it's not this. Her voice rose. Then what? What are you waiting for? He did not answer. The flame bent in the draught and stood back up. You don't know. Her voice cracked. 17 years, Yeshua. 17 years I've been waiting. Watching. And you don't know. Your father believed too. He gave up everything. His plans. His chance at a normal life. He raised you like you were precious. And now he's gone. And I'm alone. And you tell me you don't know. The tears came. She didn't try to stop them. Yeshua crossed the room, held her. He felt her hands clutch the back of his tunic. Small. He had forgotten his mother had small hands. I'm sorry I can't be what you want me to be. Not yet. Then what will you be? He held her tighter. The Citizens Committee came 3 days later. 15 men in the largest home in the village. The radicals, the moderates, the cautious. Isaac in the front row. Uncle Simon with the nationalists. James in the back. Yeshua stood before them. You've asked me to lead. I can't. The murmur started immediately. Hear me out. The room quieted. My father is dead. My mother is widowed. I have 7 brothers and sisters, the youngest still a child. If I take up this cause, I put all of them at risk. Rome doesn't negotiate with rebels. Rome crucifies them. And Rome doesn't stop at the rebel. His hand was in his pocket. He found the ring. He left it there. We would protect, Isaac started. You can't promise that. He pressed his hands flat against his legs. I won't gamble my siblings' lives. That's the duty my father left me, and I haven't finished it. A voice came from the radical faction. So you'll do nothing? I didn't say that. The room waited. Then what will you do? He did not answer at once. I don't know. I know it's not this. I know it's not politics, and it's not an army. He looked at Isaac. Your offer is generous, but I won't be bored. His eyes found James. My brother James will speak for the family. James walked to the front of the room, stood beside Yeshua. looked out at faces he'd known his whole life. "My brother is right," he said. The words came slowly. "He's the one who kept us fed after our father died. He's earned the right to make this choice. I wish he'd chosen differently. I won't pretend otherwise. I stand with him." Yeshua looked at his brother. The committee disbanded. On the fourth day, a stone struck the wall beside his shoulder as he walked to the workshop. He did not turn. He heard the boy run. He heard the boy's father not call him back. Isaac stopped at the door before he left. He looked back at Yeshua, not with anger, with something older. "I understand," he said, "but I'll be watching. I've been watching a long time. Uncle Simon called Yeshua outside. You've made a mistake. Maybe." Simon folded his arms. "Your father would have." "Don't." Yeshua's voice went cold. "Don't tell me what my father would have done. You didn't raise me." "He did." Simon looked at him. Then he turned and walked down the dusty path past the olive press. A girl was at the spring when he passed on his way home. She did not look up. She had been not looking up since spring. He did not see her. His mother was at the hearth when he came in, banking the fire for the night. She did not look up. He sat down on the low bench across the room. He waited. She said, "I let go of the angel last spring." He did not answer. The fire moved. She did not turn. "I have not told anyone," she said. "I have not let go." She looked at him then. The look was the look she had given the angel 17 years ago, in a room in this village. A girl who had been chosen and had not yet been asked. The same mixture of terror and assent. For a moment, Yeshua saw her as the girl who had said yes to something she could not name. She turned back to the fire. She finished banking it. "Then carry it," she said. She set the iron poker on the hearth. Her hands rested in her lap and stayed there. They had been moving without rest since Joseph died. They were still now. She did not get up to embrace him. He did not cross the room. He sat with her a while longer. Then he stood and went out. He passed the workshop on his way to the ridge. The lamp was burning low inside. James was on the low stool with a piece of cedar and a knife, trying to shape a yoke peg, the kind Joseph used to fit a beam to its joint. The peg was crooked. The grain had run away from him. He kept cutting. Yeshua stopped in the doorway. James saw him. He did not hide the peg. He did not raise his eyes. "It's wrong," James said. "I know." James turned the peg over. "I'll fix it." "I know." Yeshua walked on. That night, James found him on the ridge. "You could have led them," James said. "They would have followed you anywhere. And you just walked away. Why?" Yeshua was quiet. When he spoke, his voice was smaller, rougher. "Do you remember what Father used to say about wood? How you have to let it tell you what it wants to become?" "I remember." He looked at his brother. "That's what I'm doing, listening, waiting. It's not a revolution, James. Beyond that, I don't have words." "That's not an answer, I know." James sat down beside him. "I still think you're wrong," James said. "But I'll stop pushing. For now. The family's going to be all right. I'll help more. Joseph, too. We'll figure it out." Yeshua nodded. James stood, brushed the dirt from his tunic. His hand moved toward his brother's shoulder, stopped halfway, fell back. He walked down the path toward the village. Yeshua stayed on the ridge. The cold came. He didn't move. He turned his hands over in the dark. Joseph's calluses on them now, or the start of them. Hands that had dug a grave and would not take up a sword. He listened. The room inside him was empty. What had run under everything since before he could remember had gone quiet, and he sat in the cold and waited for it. He let himself think, just once, that he had imagined all of it. He let the thought sit. The cold did not answer either. When he finally stood, the village was dark. He walked down the hill alone. In his pocket, the ring was still warm. He had not taken it out to look at it. He did not need to. Chapter 11. The girl. She was 15 when she fell in love with a boy who was already gone. The first time she saw him, she dropped the jar. Not the whole jar. She caught it against her hip before it hit the ground. But water sloshed over the rim and soaked the front of her dress, and she stood there at the well, like a girl who had never carried water before, which she had every morning since she was 8. He was crossing the square with a jar on each shoulder. 17. His sleeves rolled. Everyone in Nazareth knew who the carpenter's eldest was, the boy from the temple. She had grown up hearing his name. He walked past without seeing her. His eyes were on the road. The square and the well and the girl with the wet dress did not register. She stood at the well until the water dried on her cloth. She did not write his name on anything. She did not lie awake. What she did was pay attention. The next morning, she came to the well at the same hour. He did not appear. On the 4th day, she came earlier, and he was already there, filling a jar from the cistern. He nodded at her. A half nod. A stranger's nod. She nodded back. She watched his back until he turned the corner, then filled her own jar and walked home, and could not remember a single step of the route. Her mother said, "You're flushed, son. It's barely risen." Her mother looked at her, choosing between inquiry and mercy. She chose mercy. She mapped him. He came to the well between dawn and first light. He worked the shop until the heat broke. On clear evenings, he climbed the ridge above the village and sat alone until the stars came. She knew his schedule before she knew his voice. The other girls who noticed him noticed the obvious things. He was tall. His shoulders had filled. His face was good. They talked about it at the well, as girls do. And Rebecca listened and said nothing. What she saw was the weight. He moved through Nazareth carrying something no one could see. Behind his eyes, there was a distance, as if the village were a smaller container than whatever lived inside him, and the effort of fitting himself into it cost something he paid every hour without complaint. She saw it when he was with the children. Ruth on his hip while he stirred a pot one-handed. Martha leaning into his shoulder. His face when he looked down at the girl in his arms, softening into something behind the smile, as if the child were the only real thing in the room. She wanted to be looked at like that. Once, passing the house, she had heard him laugh. Not the quiet sound he gave the village. A real one. Helpless, bent over, the little ones shrieking around him. She had stopped in the lane to listen. It lasted only a moment, and then it was gone, and she had stood there, wondering who he was when he was not carrying the whole of them on his back. She never heard it again. Months passed. She found reasons to walk past the workshop. Not every day. She was too disciplined for that and too proud. He never looked up. Once he did. Sabbath afternoon. The street was empty. He was sitting on the workshop bench, doing nothing, which she had never seen him do. Hands still in his lap, face turned toward the window. He turned and saw her in the doorway. He looked at her standing there, on that street, at that hour, and something in his face settled, as if she were a thing he had been expecting without knowing it. 1 second. 2. 3. "Rebecca," he said. "Good Sabbath." Good Sabbath. She walked home. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them flat against her stomach and breathed and breathed and breathed. She turned the moment over for a week, but not surprised. His voice on her name, as if testing whether it was the right one. He came to her father's house once, a Sabbath afternoon. Ezra had a question about an order, and the two men talked in the courtyard while Rebecca sat at the loom against the far wall, keeping her hands moving. Then a neighbor called from the road, and her father had to go. The courtyard door was open. The two of them were alone. Leaves stirred in the grape arbor overhead. He did not leave. He sat where Ezra had sat. He looked at the loom. "You weave well." "Thank you." A silence. Not uncomfortable. Not the silence of strangers. She had 2 years of watching in her chest and could not unspeak any of it. She kept her hands on the wool. "May I ask you something?" she said. He looked up. "What do you believe?" He was quiet. She thought she had asked too much. "I believe the Father hears people who are not heard by anyone else. I believe the work in front of you is the work. I believe most of the things the priests say, and a few of the things they have stopped saying." He paused. "I believe a great deal of what I cannot prove." The arbor moved overhead. "What are you going to do with your life?" "I don't know yet." She kept her hands on the wool. "I think you do know. And you are not saying." He looked at her. His face changed in a way she did not have a word for, as if a door had opened a single inch. "Perhaps," he said. The neighbor's voice carried across the courtyard. Ezra was coming back. Yeshua stood. "Thank you for the conversation, Rebecca." He walked out to meet her father at the door. She kept her hands on the wool until the wind moved again in the arbor and her breathing slowed. She turned 16. Suitors came. The baker's son, a man from Cana, a Sepphoris merchant, older, with land and a widower's earnest need. Her father presented each one with the same neutral face, and each time she said no, and Ezra accepted it. One evening, after the third suitor left, he sat beside her on the roof. "Is there someone else?" She said nothing. Then, maybe. A carpenter's boy. She looked at him, startled. He shrugged. "I have eyes, daughter, and you walk past that workshop more often than any trade route requires." Her face burned. "He's a good young man," Ezra said. "Maybe the best I've seen in this village. He has a family to support and no money and something in his eyes that worries me." "What?" Ezra looked out at the valley. "He won't stay." She felt the truth of it land in her stomach. The ridge, the distance, the container too small. "I know." Ezra waited. She did not say more. He put his arm around her shoulder, and they sat on the roof and watched the stars come out over the valley. The trade caravans threading south, the whole world going somewhere while Nazareth held still. "Give it time," he said. "The feeling may change." "I know, Father." He kissed her forehead and went inside. Inside the carpenter's house, his mother slept poorly. She loved him. That was the whole prayer. But sometimes in the dark, she wished the angel had chosen someone else. She would not say it in daylight. She would never say it. But the dark heard it, and the dark kept it. And in the morning she would fold the bread, and not remember she had said anything at all. Rebecca almost told Miriam 3 times. The first time, washing clothes at the stream, Miriam was complaining about James, and Rebecca opened her mouth to say, "I love your brother." And what came out was, "James will come around." The second time at the well, Miriam said something about Yeshua working too hard, not eating enough. Rebecca's chest tightened. She gripped the rope and looked away. "You all right?" Dust in my eye. The third time she was ready. They were sitting in Miriam's doorway on a Sabbath afternoon. She had the sentence rehearsed. "Miriam, I need to tell you something about your brother." Yeshua walked past with Ruth on his hip and Simon holding his hand. His face was wearing the look behind the smile. Rebecca's throat closed. Miriam glanced at her, then at her brother, then back at Rebecca. Her eyebrow rose half an inch. Rebecca looked at the ground. Neither of them said anything. She was 17 now, 2 years of it. The watching, the not saying, the holding. She knew he favored his left shoulder on cold mornings, that he paused before entering the synagogue, half a breath, as if adjusting something inside himself before he walked in, that he spoke differently to each child, calibrated, as his father had. She knew the ridge was the only place he set the weight down. She would tell Miriam first. Then she would ask to see him tomorrow. That night she lay on her mat in her father's house and listened to Nazareth settle. Dogs. A baby somewhere down the lane. Wind through the olive trees. The weight sat in her throat. She had not asked for the weight. She had held it 2 years. She closed her eyes. Chapter 12. Rebecca. She was 17 when she asked the carpenter to marry her. She had watched him for 2 years. She had spoken with him once. She had prepared the words for a week. By dawn, the words were gone. She had only her hands and the dress her mother had woven for her birthday, and the small gold ring her grandmother had worn for 60 years before she died. The ring was in the pocket, sewn into the hip of the dress. She did not know yet whether she would show it to him. The carpenter would come at the 9th hour. Word reached Mary by mid-morning. She did not come to Rebecca's house. She did not send a message. But when Rebecca went to the well to draw water for the household, the last time as a daughter, Mary was already there, filling her clay jar with the slow, careful motions of a woman who had been widowed for 4 years. The two women did not speak. Mary did not look up from her jar. When Rebecca had filled her own jar, she walked past Mary on the path home. Mary's hand reached out as she passed, took Rebecca's elbow for a moment, squeezed, did not hold, let her pass. The hand was small. Rebecca walked home with the jar against her hip. She did not spill it. Her father met her at the door. "Are you ready, daughter?" "I'm ready, Father." Ezra looked at her face. His eyes were the eyes of a man who had spent 30 years reading other men's eyes across tables. He saw something she did not know she was showing him. He did not name it. "You have good taste, daughter. I will leave you alone with him. The garden bench, the olive tree your grandmother planted." "Thank you, Father." He kissed her forehead and went into the house. She heard him tell her mother to set the table for guests anyway. Then she heard her mother begin to cry. He came at the 9th hour. 19 now. His tunic was clean. He had washed before coming. He bowed to her at the gate. "Rebecca." "Yeshua." She led him to the bench. They sat. She did not look at him at first. She looked at the olive tree. She looked at the dust on her sandal. She looked at her hands in her lap. She used the words she had. "I love you." He was very still. "I have loved you since I was 15. I have not told anyone for 2 years. I want to be your wife." The wind moved in the olive tree. He said her name. Once. "You honor me." "I don't want to honor you. I want to marry you." He turned his face to the side. He looked at her hands in her lap. He looked back at her face. "I can't." She made herself breathe. "Why?" "I can't." She did not look away. "Tell me why." His eyes were on hers. The wind moved. I can't, not won't, can't. She had known. She had known since the first morning he walked past her at the well without seeing her. She had known the afternoon they spoke alone in her father's courtyard, when the door opened an inch and did not close. She had known when Mary's small hand touched her elbow that morning on the path home. She put her hands flat against the bench beside her. The stone was cool. You would have, she said. His head turned. What? You would have, if you could have. He was slow to answer. Yes. Tell me. If my life were my own. She watched his face. Say it. If my life were my own, I would have chosen you. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, she was crying. She had not given herself permission. The crying had given itself permission. He let her finish. When she had finished, she stood. I'm not going to marry anyone else. Rebecca. She lifted her chin. I'm not asking, I'm telling you what I've decided. That's not fair to you. Nothing about this is fair. Don't ask me to make it fair. He stood. They faced each other. He did not reach for her hand or touch her face. If you ever change your mind, she said, you know where to find me. I know. The olive tree is still. Goodbye, Yeshua. Goodbye, Rebecca. She turned, walked out of the garden. She did not look back. Her father found him on the bench. My daughter told me. I'm sorry. Ezra looked at the olive tree. You did the right thing. It was the wrong answer. Ezra sat down where his daughter had been. The stone was still warm from her body. Yes, he said. The olive tree moved. Take care of yourself, Carpenter. Rebecca did not go home. She walked to the well at the edge of the village where she had first seen him at 15. She did not draw water. She put her hand on the stone rim where she had stood 100 mornings. She put her cheek against the wood of the crossbeam. The grandmother's ring was still in the pocket sewn into her hip. She had not shown it to him. She stood there until her father found her and brought her home. Chapter 13. The Well in Daylight. Neither of them slept. And in Mary's house the lamp was already burning when the first rooster called, and in Ezra's house the lamp was already burning. Yeshua sat on his father's bench in the workshop before the sun cleared the ridge, his hands on his knees and the wood plane untouched at his side. And on the corner of the bench beside the lamp, the yoke peg lay straight. The grain that had run away from James coaxed back into line over 3 days. Ezra's plow handle was due Friday, and the mason's doorframe Sunday. And he took up the plane and began. His mother came at first light with a small wooden tray holding bread and water and a few olives, and she set it beside the wood and put her hand on his shoulder and told him he had done what he had to do. He gave her no answer, and she held his eyes and said, I know what it cost you. Her thumb pressing once into the cloth before she lifted her hand and went back to the house. Rebecca had not gotten back into bed, but had sat from the second hour of the night until first light on the low bench under the grape arbor where she had sat with her father 1,000 times. And when the roosters called, she stood and walked to the well at the edge of the village and drew water she did not need. She carried the jar home and went to the loom her mother had set up in the inner courtyard and put her hands to the wool. James came to the workshop in the late afternoon and stopped in the doorway, saying the committee would meet again that night and had asked for his brother. And Yeshua went on planning and told him no. James said their mother had told him he had not eaten, and Yeshua said he had eaten half. And when James answered that she had said all of it, Yeshua said half again, still working the wood, until James came inside. and said he would go to the committee but would not join it. He looked at what his brother had made, and at the tools on their father's wall. I wouldn't have said no to her. Yeshua did not look up. "Oh, no. I'm not you," James said. And Yeshua told him he knew that too, and James went out. Across the village, Rebecca found her father at the counting table and sat down opposite him, and he set the bead string aside and waited while she told him she would not marry anyone, and then told him she would help him run the business and learn the numbers and be useful to him. Ezra's eyes softened, and he told her she had always been useful, and when she said, "Not like this," he pulled a second stool to his side of the table and pushed the ledger between them and turned it so she could read, and she came around the table and sat beside him. Chapter 14. The frequency. He climbed the ridge alone for the last time as a boy. He left the workshop at sundown. The yoke peg was on the bench where James had set it down a week ago. It was straight. He did not pick it up. He left it where his brother had put it. He carried nothing but the harp. He passed the well at the edge of the village. The stone still held the afternoon. The path to the ridge began behind the well and rose for a quarter mile through scrub and olive and broken stone. He had climbed this path since he was 8 years old. He climbed it now. His mother had stopped asking where he went when he was 13. She knew. She had not stopped him. At the top of the ridge there was a stone he had been sitting on for 11 years. The stone faced east toward the desert. Behind him to the west, the village settled into evening. He set the harp down on the dust beside the stone. He did not play it. He sat down on the stone. The hum had been in him since before he could remember. In the years after his father died, it had changed. It became a kind of pulling, as if something had been planted in him long before he was born and was reaching for somewhere to put down roots. He had not told anyone. He stayed on the stone until the first stars came. The cold came with them. He had not brought a cloak. The cold sat where it sat. His body had learned to wait. He listened now. The half-line surfaced under his breath, the one his father had taught him on the way down the ridge when he was 9. "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want." He did not say it twice. He did not need to. His father's hand was on his shoulder. Not memory, presence, the weight, the warmth through the wool of the tunic, the specific callus on Joseph's thumb where the chisel handle had worn it flat over 30 years. The way the hand always paused at the curve of the shoulder before lifting, as if memorizing the boy underneath it. The day before the scaffold came down, he had not noticed the pause. He noticed it now. The hand stayed. He let it stay. Then, the hand was gone. The hum that had been in him since before he could remember was gone with it. He was on his knees. His hands were on the dust beside his knees. His breathing had changed. He was breathing hard, as if he had been running, and had just stopped. His face was wet. He had not cried. The wetness was just there. His chest was quiet. The quiet was wider than what had left it. It filled the space behind his ribs the way water fills a cistern. He stopped looking for the word. The looking for the word had been the loneliness. There was a word for what was happening. He did not know it. He would never know it. He missed his father. His chest caved in. He stayed where he was. The stars moved through the night above the ridge, and he did not move with them. The first light came over the eastern edge of the desert in the 3rd hour of the morning. The light came to his face. He had been turned toward it for hours. When he stood, his legs did not work at first. He had been on his knees the duration of the night. The dust was on his palms and on his knees. and on the front of his tunic. He brushed at it. His hands moved. The dust came off. The sentence came back to him. His father had set it on a board in the workshop, and again on the ridge when he was small. The wood was here before us. It will be hereafter. In its place, there was something steadier than a hum. He walked to the eastern edge of the ridge, a side that faced away from the village, a side that looked out toward the desert and the road to Jordan and everything that was not Nazareth. He watched the light move out across the desert. Then he turned. He walked back along the ridge to the western edge where the path went down toward Nazareth. The harp was still beside the stone where he had set it down at sundown. He did not pick it up. He left it there. The strings caught the first light and held it. He stopped at the top of the path. He looked down at the village in its first light. The lamps in the windows. The smoke from the morning fires. His mother's house. The workshop. The well. The mother who had touched his shoulder the morning before. The brother who had brought him a piece of cedar. The girl at her loom across the village rooftops. He stood there. Chapter 15. The door. The plane moved. The cedar was old. 3 years, maybe 4. Joseph Jr. had pulled it from the back shelf this morning because the new boards had a knot pattern Yeshua did not like. The old boards always cut better. The old boards remembered being trees. Yeshua was 25. The shop still smelled like his father. The plane still fit his palm, the way Joseph had shaped it. He worked as Joseph had worked, slow, leaning into the grain, letting the wood tell him where it wanted to go. Joseph Jr. was at his own bench across the room, 21 now. The hand on the plane was a man's hand. The boy who had once carved animals and hidden them under his pallet made cabinets the Sepharist foreman paid full price for. 6 years had passed since the ridge. The first month after, the listening was still everywhere. By the year mark, it was the floor of his life. He stood on it. He worked. He had married no one. There had been no one to refuse. Mary's hair had gone gray. James was in his own house with Esther and their second child. Miriam was promised to Jacob, the stonemason's son, who had once been a boy who defended her older brother in the schoolyard. Martha had married Samuel from down the lane and was already pregnant. Joseph Jr. was the workshop. Simon was apprenticed to a wheelwright 2 villages over. Jude was 17 and made it his business to bring his eldest brother water at the hottest hour of the afternoon without being asked. Ruth was 10. In the spring, word had reached him that a foreigner had been asking after the carpenter of Nazareth in the markets of Sepharis, whether he was the one who had argued Torah with a Tyrian merchant as a boy and won. Yeshua had thought little of it, but the asking had come twice more since each time, from a town nearer than the last, and somewhere in the second month of it, he had stopped being surprised by it. He did not know why he had stopped. The plane had moved. The knock came at the 3rd hour of the afternoon. Joseph Jr. looked up. "I'll go," he said. "It's for me." He did not know how he knew. He knew. He had known since the spring. He set the plane on the bench. He crossed the workshop and passed through the courtyard where Ruth had stopped her sweeping. She was standing very still with the broom in her hand, her eyes already on the door. He opened the door. The man on the threshold was foreign, linen the color of dried river clay. A turban wrapped as Yeshua had seen men wrap them on the road to Damascus once. His skin was the color of polished walnut, and his sandals were caked with the white dust of the road north out of Caesarea. Behind him in the lane, a boy held the reins of 2 horses, 12, maybe 13, dressed in the same linen but cleaner, watching Yeshua with the open curiosity of a child who has been allowed to watch his father work and has decided to take notes. "Are you the carpenter?" the man said. "I am." The man looked past him into the workshop, then back. "My name is Asok. I have come from Parukacha through Persia and the road north, 2.5 years on the road. I'm looking for a tutor for my son." Yeshua said nothing. "You are recommended by a caravan trader I met in Damascus. He passed through this village when you were a boy. He told my father about you 15 years ago, and my father told me. He said you asked more questions than a Roman tax collector, and your answers were stranger and better." Yeshua was quiet. "What was his name?" "He called himself Adnon, an old one. He told my father he had been looking for you most of his life." Asok glanced around the small workshop. The cedar, the plain tunic, the boy in the lane with the horses. Standing here, I'm less certain what he meant. Yeshua did not answer. He had been an infant the one time the man had held his gaze, and could not have remembered a face. But the name dropped through him, and he stood a moment, listening for it to land. He looked at the boy in the lane. The boy looked back without blinking. "I have no formal training." "I know." Yeshua's eyes stayed on the boy. "I have not left Galilee." "That is not what I came for." Yeshua came a step out of the doorway. "How old is the boy?" 12. "His name is Vidar. He has read everything his tutors at home could put in front of him. He has exhausted them. I have come this far because nothing in my country has worked for him." The boy in the lane had not stopped watching him. "What are you offering?" 2 years on the road. The Mediterranean route. Alexandria, Crete, Carthage, Naples, Rome, Athens. Ephesus, home through Antioch. 200 denarii per year. Lodging, food, transport. Wages enough to keep your family in good repair while you're gone. You'll bring nothing but yourself." Yeshua's hand was on the doorframe. The wood was warm from the noon sun. The same warmth he had felt as a boy when his father's hand rested on the low stone wall at the turn of the ridge path. "Why me? I do not know yet. I will know when I see what my son becomes." The horses moved behind the boy. The boy steadied them without looking down. "I need to speak with my mother." "Of course." He was already turning. "Wait here." He walked back through the courtyard. Ruth was still standing with the broom. She had not moved. He passed her without speaking, and she did not ask. She had learned, like her brother, to wait. He went into the house. His mother was at the loom. She did not look up when he came in. She had heard the knock. She had heard the conversation through the wall. She had been weaving the same row for the last 3 minutes. He sat down on the bench across from her. She did not look up. He did not speak. The shuttle moved twice. 3 times. The wool was good wool, dyed dark, the kind she did not use for the family clothes. She had been making something for him for the last month. She had not told him what. "How long?" she said. 2 years. The shuttle crossed once. "Where?" "The Mediterranean route. Asok says home through Antioch." The shuttle paused. "How much?" He told her the figure. She nodded once. The shuttle moved. He was 40 heartbeats from saying, "I will not go." He could feel the shape of the sentence in his mouth. He waited. His mother set the shuttle down. She placed her hands flat on the loom frame, the way she had placed her hands on the hearth the night she had released the angel 8 years ago. The hands were still then. The hands were still now. She looked at him. "I told you the angel was no longer mine." "I know." Her eyes did not leave his. "Go." He did not move. "Mama." "Go, Yeshua." She put her hands back on the shuttle. She did not look at him again. He sat there until the shuttle had moved twice more. Then he stood, and he walked out into the courtyard where Ruth was still standing with the broom. He stopped in front of her. She looked up at him. "You're going somewhere?" she said. Yes. She held the broom with both hands. For how long? 2 years. She thought about it. Bring me a shell, she said. A real one. From far. I will. She looked at him a moment longer. You came back before. From Egypt. She said it plainly, a thing she knew. You'll come back from this. She was 10. She thought he would be gone a month. He would be gone 2 years, and she would be 12 when he returned, and she would have done some of her growing without him. I'll come back, he said. She nodded once and went back to sweeping. He turned back to the door. The man, Asok, was where Yeshua had left him. The boy, Vidar, was where he had left him. The horses had not moved. Yes, Yeshua said. Asok did not smile. He inclined his head once. When can you be ready? 3 mornings. Asok gathered the reins. Caesarea harbor by sundown of the 4th day. A ship is waiting. I will be there. Asok turned to the boy. The boy mounted the smaller horse without a word. Asok mounted the larger one. He looked down at Yeshua. My son will know who you are by the time we reach Alexandria. I do not yet know. I would like to know. I do not know either. Asok nodded a second time. He turned the horse. The two of them rode away down the lane, the boy at the man's shoulder, the dust rising slow behind them in the afternoon light. Yeshua stood at the door until they were past the olive press. He went back into the workshop. Joseph Jr. was at the bench. Did I hear that right? Yes. Joseph Jr. set down his chisel. You're going. How long? 2 years. A pause. Who keeps the shop? You. Joseph Jr. looked at the floor. He nodded once. All right. He did not look up. When he did, his eyes were not wet, but they were the eyes of a younger brother who has just been told he's no longer the younger brother in the room where the work happens. Yeshua crossed the floor. He put his hand on Joseph Jr.'s shoulder. You have been ready for a year, he said. You will be better at it than I have been. Joseph Jr. did not answer right away. He reached past his brother and picked up the plane Yeshua had set down on the bench. He turned it in his palm. He ran his thumb along the worn place where Joseph's hand had shaped it 30 years ago, and where his own hand was beginning to fit. He set the plane back down. I know that too. Joseph Jr. almost smiled. He took his apron off. He hung it on the peg next to Joseph's apron, which still hung there, the tools above it in the order Joseph had kept them. The two aprons were the same size now. He could not say when that had happened. Late that afternoon, he climbed the ridge. He went up the path he had climbed since he was 8. The same path he had walked beside Joseph every Sabbath of his boyhood. The same path he had climbed alone, the night he was 19. At the turn where the path left the village, he stopped at the low stone wall. He put his hand on the top stone where Joseph's hand had rested 10,000 times. The stone was warm from the day. It was warm where the hand returned. He did not stay on the ridge long. He came back down the hill. In his pocket, a small gold ring with the amber stone was still warm. He had carried it for 10 years. He had not taken it out in months. Ruth was waiting at the gate with the broom still in her hand. He went inside.